Hello and welcome to Investment Insight. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Now let's break down what's happening in the markets today in a clear and simple way.
Thanks for having me. There's a lot to cover today.
There really is. So imagine waking up tomorrow, right?
Mm.
And you find out that the next life-saving cancer drug you might need and the underlying AI infrastructure that's managing your retirement portfolio were both engineered entirely outside of the Western ecosystem.
Yeah, it sounds like science fiction, honestly.
Right. But today is April 27, 2026, and that hypothetical is, well, it's rapidly becoming our actual reality. We are doing a deep dive today into a massive structural shift in global capital.
And it really is massive.
Yeah. According to recent analysis, China is aggressively transitioning away from its old reputation. The whole generic copycat manufacturer thing. They are embedding themselves as a primary engine of global innovation.
Exactly. And the data shows this pivot is anchored in two critical sectors. We're talking biotech and artificial intelligence.
So why does this matter for you, the everyday investor?
Well, because that transformation is arguably the most important macroeconomic trend of the decade. Like, for anyone looking at their portfolio right now, the old rule book is basically useless.
Because it used to be so simple.
Yeah, exactly. 10 years ago, you could confidently buy a broad technology or healthcare index fund and just assume American innovation would pull the whole basket up.
Right, just set it and forget it.
But the landscape just doesn't work like that anymore. The capital flows have completely fractured. We really need to follow exactly where the smart money is moving and look at the specific subsectors drawing billions in funding.
It fundamentally changes how you have to assess risk.
It really does.
Now, before we dive into the actual numbers, let's just establish a quick baseline. We are going to touch on some serious geopolitical friction today.
Oh, definitely. You can't ignore it.
Right. We're talking U.S. trade restrictions, export controls, and, the protective trade policies actively being enforced right now under the current Trump administration.
Which is obviously a very heated topic.
Exactly. But I want to make it super clear for everyone listening. Our goal here is strictly objective analysis. We're not taking any political sides here. We are just letting the data dictate the conversation, looking purely at the mechanics of the tech, the biology, and where the money is going.
I think that's the only way to do it. The market doesn't really care about political rhetoric. It cares about the return on capital.
So true.
And if we look at where that capital is moving, biology is actually the perfect starting point. The biotech sector right now just completely destroys that outdated stereotype of cheap overseas manufacturing.
It really does. I was looking at the recent Georgetown study published in JAMA.
Yeah.
And the numbers are just staggering. It maps out early-stage drug development, and it basically shows the end of the American monopoly.
Yeah, we have definitely moved into a U.S.-China dual-hub reality.
Just look at the shift. So according to the data, back in 2015, the U.S. controlled about 48% of early-stage drug programs globally.
Almost half the market.
Right. And China was hovering at just 8%, which is about 829 programs. But fast forward to the 2024 data, and it's a completely different world.
Completely flipped.
Yeah. The U.S. share dropped to 37%, while China surged up to 32%, fielding over 6,145 active programs.
And that trajectory, over less than a decade, that is practically unheard of in pharmaceutical history. But we do need to contextualize what that 32% actually means.
Right.
Because those figures can be really easily misinterpreted.
Well, let me push back on that exact point then, because when everyday folks hear 37% versus 32%, the immediate reaction is, the U.S. is being overtaken.
Sure, that's the natural conclusion.
So is the data suggesting that China is just outright beating Western pharmaceutical companies at their own game?
No. And that distinction is critical for how you should be allocating your capital. The U.S. remains the single largest, most capitalized innovation hub on the planet.
Okay, so we're not losing our crown just yet.
Right. What we are witnessing isn't a hostile takeover. It's more like the emergence of a parallel engine.
A parallel engine.
Yeah. Think of global biotech like a massive blockbuster movie. For decades, the U.S. was the sole visionary director running the entire production reel.
Okay, I like that analogy.
So what the data shows is that China hasn't fired the director. They've simply pulled up a chair as a highly capable co-director. They're running a massive simultaneous production unit.
That makes a lot of sense. But it raises the obvious question of mechanics, like how does a secondary market build a 6,000 drug pipeline that quickly?
It's a fair question.
You don't just snap your fingers and conjure up a biotech ecosystem out of thin air. What is the actual mechanism driving this speed?
It's really a combination of an aggressive regulatory overhaul and just sheer structural efficiency in their healthcare system.
What do you mean by regulatory overhaul?
Well, on the regulatory side, China's National Medical Products Administration, the NMPA, they completely rewrote their rulebook. They implemented a 30-day review channel for innovative new drugs.
Wait, 30 days. From submission to human trial clearance. That's incredibly fast compared to the traditional FDA timeline here in the States.
It shaves months, sometimes even years, off the front end of the process. But honestly, the real accelerator is their clinical infrastructure.
Okay, break that down for us.
Think about how clinical trials work in the West. The U.S. healthcare system is highly fragmented, right? It's spread across thousands of private networks,
Oh yeah, it's amazing.
which makes it incredibly difficult and time-consuming to find, verify, and recruit patients with very specific genetic markers for a trial.
Right, finding the right people takes forever.
But China operates massive, highly centralized hospital networks. So if a biotech firm there needs, say, 500 patients with a specific lung cancer mutation.
They just pull up a list?
Basically, yeah. Their centralized database can identify and funnel those patients into a trial almost instantly. That structural speed moving from lab validation right into robust human trials, that is what generated those 6,145 programs.
Okay, so fast trials mean faster data.
Hmm.
But just having a huge pipeline volume doesn't automatically mean profitability.
Not at all.
Because it costs billions to actually commercialize a drug. So if Western Big Pharma is watching this parallel engine spin up, how are they reacting? I mean, they have their own massive pipeline problems right now.
Oh, they are essentially opening their checkbooks to just buy the data. Big Pharma is currently staring down the barrel of a massive patent cliff.
A patent cliff. Let's explain what that means.
Sure, over the next few years, the exclusive patents on many of their top-selling multi-billion-dollar blockbuster drugs are expiring.
Right, and the moment that happens, cheap generic versions flood the market, and their revenues basically just evaporate overnight.
Exactly. So they are desperate for new, complex medicines, but their internal R&D is often way too slow. So they are aggressively purchasing the rights to these early-stage Chinese innovations. It's a strategy known as out-licensing.
And the capital involved in this out-licensing is just massive. Looking at the analysis, the total deal value for Western companies buying Chinese biotech assets hit a record $137.7 billion in 2025.
It's a flood of money.
And the velocity is increasing too. The average deal size jumped by 76% in just the first few months of 2026.
Right, but they aren't just buying index funds or spreading it around randomly.
No, the data shows they are hyper-targeting very specific molecular engineering, specifically ADCs and bispecific antibodies. So let's dig into the mechanics of those. What exactly are ADCs?
Well, antibody-drug conjugates, or ADCs, are arguably the most valuable assets in oncology today. To understand why the money is flowing here, just look at traditional chemotherapy.
Okay.
Chemo is essentially a carpet bombing strategy. It poisons the fast-growing cancer cells, but it indiscriminately damages healthy cells in the process, which is what causes those brutal side effects.
All right, it just attacks everything.
Exactly. But an ADC is like a guided smart bomb. It uses a custom-engineered antibody that actively hunts down a specific protein found only on the surface of the cancer cell.
Wow.
Yeah, it physically attaches to it, and only then does it release its highly toxic chemical payload directly inside the cancer cell.
Leaving the healthy tissue completely untouched.
Precisely.
That's incredible. And according to the latest research, China accounted for nearly 90% of all global licensing deals for ADCs in 2025.
Which is total market dominance in that specific subsector.
It really is. But you also mentioned bispecific antibodies. How do those differ from the smart bomb approach?
Bispecific antibodies operate on a different but equally brilliant mechanism. Instead of carrying a toxic payload, a bispecific antibody is engineered with two different hands.
Two hands.
Yeah, one hand grabs onto the cancer cell, and the other hand physically grabs a T cell, which is like the soldier of your body's immune system.
Okay, I see where this is going.
It essentially acts like a microscopic bouncer, right? Dragging the cancer cell and the immune cell together and forcing your own immune system to recognize and attack the tumor.
That is wild. And Western pharma companies are pouring billions into securing the rights to both of these technologies.
Billions upon billions, yes.
But you know, that $137.7 billion headline figure we talked about, it's a little deceiving, isn't it?
Very deceiving.
Because when I look at how these deals are actually structured, it feels like Western pharma might be playing a completely different game. It actually reminds me of a massive book publishing deal.
How so?
Well, you read a headline that a debut author signed a $5 million deal, but they don't actually get a $5 million check on day one. They get maybe $100,000 up front. The rest is locked behind milestones.
Right, like finishing the draft, hitting the bestseller list.
Getting a movie adaptation, exactly.
Yeah.
So are Western pharmaceutical companies treating these multi-billion-dollar biotech deals the same way? Are they just placing cheap bets rather than truly committing all that cash?
Yes. It's highly conditional capital, and honestly, you've hit on the most critical metric for biotech investors.
Right.
You absolutely must separate the headline value from the upfront cash.
And the data proves this out, right?
It does. Take the February 2026 deal between the Chinese firm Innovent and Eli Lilly. The press release touted a deal worth up to $8.5 billion. It sounds like an absolute massive commitment. But the actual upfront cash, the guaranteed money transferred to Innovent's balance sheet right away, was only $350 million.
Wow. That's barely 4% of the headline value.
Exactly. And we saw the exact same structure in March when Sino Biopharm signed with Sanofi. The headline was $1.53 billion, but the upfront payment was just $135 million.
So the vast majority of that capital is strictly milestone dependent.
Entirely. Does the drug pass phase 2 trials? Does it clear FDA approval in the U.S.? Does it achieve commercial sales targets?
And if it fails?
If the drug fails in clinical trials, which, let's be honest, is statistically highly probable in biotech, the Western company just walks away, having only risked that initial upfront payment.
Got it. So as an investor, you cannot value these firms based on their press releases. You have to value them on their guaranteed cash and the statistical probability of the drug actually working.
Exactly.
But even with those milestones, the fact that Eli Lilly and Sanofi are making these deals right now is incredibly telling, given the geopolitical climate.
Oh, absolutely.
Because in 2024, the U.S. passed the Biosecure Act, which deliberately restricted certain Chinese biofirms like WuXi AppTec from accessing U.S. taxpayer dollars.
Right.
And now, in 2026, the Trump administration is highly focused on decoupling critical supply chains. Yet, despite all this immense political friction, the capital continues to flow eastward.
Because the underlying asset is simply too valuable to ignore. That friction just highlights the reality of the market. Western pharmaceutical giants have basically calculated that the financial risk of missing out on the next generational cancer treatment is significantly higher than the geopolitical risk of doing business in a restricted market.
The science is forcing the collaboration.
It is. Money always follows the science.
So in biotech, we're seeing this forced geopolitical decoupling actually accelerate China's domestic innovation. They basically build a closed-loop system for human trials and drug development. So are we seeing that exact same closed-loop survival tactic play out in Silicon, specifically with the massive chip bans? Because this brings us to the tech sector and the April 24th, 2026 preview of China's DeepSeek V4 AI model.
We are seeing exactly the same tactic. The parallels between the biological ecosystem and the digital ecosystem are just undeniable.
What's really fascinating about the DeepSeek V4 release is the market's reaction. Because last year, when they dropped the V3 and R1 models, it sent absolute shockwaves through Western tech markets.
Oh, investors were stunned by the efficiency of it.
Yeah, but the reaction to V4 a few days ago was remarkably calm. Why the muted response this time?
Well, the market has fully priced in their software efficiency. It is no longer a surprise that Chinese engineers can punch far above their weight class when it comes to algorithmic training.
That makes sense.
Furthermore, the domestic competition within China has really intensified. Companies like Kimi and Quinn are pushing updates that rival DeepSeek, so a powerful new model is simply the new baseline expectation over there.
I also want to look at the performance benchmarks, because that might explain the calm reaction too. The data shows that V4 easily beats the top open-weight models available today.
Yes, it's very capable.
But it is still lagging slightly behind the absolute top-tier closed proprietary models coming out of the U.S., specifically Gemini 3.1 Pro and GPT 5.4.
Right.
So if it's not actually claiming the absolute #1 spot globally, why does the capital still care so much about this specific release?
Because you have to look underneath the software. The real breakthrough of V4 isn't the algorithmic capability, it is the physical hardware it runs on.
The hardware.
Yeah. Based on the technical analysis, V4 is heavily adapted to run on Huawei's Ascend AI chips, specifically utilizing their Ascend 950 supernodes.
Okay.
While the model wasn't trained 100% exclusively on domestic hardware, it represents a massive structural shift toward total hardware independence.
Wait, if the U.S. export controls completely cut off their access to NVIDIA's top-tier chips, which are the undisputed gold standard for AI training, how is Huawei actually piecing together these ascend 950 supernodes to train something as computationally massive as DeepSeek V4.
It's honestly a masterclass in architectural engineering.
Yeah.
Since they can't import single hyperfast chips like the NVIDIA H100, Huawei relies on advanced networking.
How does that work?
They take thousands of domestic chips that might be slightly older or individually less efficient, and they wire them together using incredibly fast custom interconnects.
So they're combining them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They are essentially brute forcing the computing power by creating massive synchronized clusters or supernodes.
I love this. So it's like a world-class Michelin star chef who has always relied on rare imported ingredients to create their signature dishes.
Right.
Suddenly, a trade embargo blocks all those imports.
Mm.
And instead of closing the restaurant, the chef redesigns the entire menu, proving they can still earn that Michelin star using solely ingredients they cultivated in their own backyard.
That is precisely what is happening. The global AI boom of the last 3 years was completely dependent on a single point of failure.
NVIDIA Silicon.
Exactly. DeepSeek V4, running on Ascend supernodes, proves that a closed-loop system, meaning domestic chips, running domestic algorithms, powering domestic applications, is not only viable, but it's highly competitive.
But having a competitive backyard-grown infrastructure is only half the battle, right? You have to actually get developers to build on top of it.
You need users, absolutely.
And looking at the data, DeepSeek is deploying a ruthless, scorched earth price war to capture that market share.
Oh, it's aggressive.
They offered a 75% discount on their V4 Pro tier through early May. And more significantly, they slashed their API cache hit prices to 1/10 of the original cost.
That's the real kicker right there.
Let's drill down into that mechanism. What exactly is an API cache hit, and why is slashing that specific price the ultimate weapon for user acquisition?
Sure. So an API is the bridge that allows a developer's application to communicate with DeepSeek's AI. Now, imagine a short order cook in a busy diner.
Okay, I'm with you.
A cache miss is when a customer orders a burger and the cook has to walk all the way to the walk-in fridge, grab a raw onion, chop it, and cook it. It takes time and energy.
Right.
A cache hit is when the cook realizes everyone is ordering burgers, so they just keep a massive pile of pre-chopped onions right on the counter.
So it's ready to go.
Exactly. The AI effectively memorizes the context it just processed, allowing it to retrieve the data instantly without recomputing it from scratch.
That makes total sense.
By slashing the price of the specific memory retrieval function to 1/10, DeepSeek makes it incredibly cheap for developers to build applications that require constant, ongoing context.
Which perfectly aligns with where the technology is heading, right? The era of agentic AI.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Because we aren't just building chatbots that answer a single question and go to sleep anymore. We are building autonomous agents designed to continuously run in the background.
Right.
An AI agent that reads your emails, manages your schedule, monitors the stock market, and executes trades autonomously. It needs to constantly access a massive context window. That requires millions of API calls.
Exactly. And DeepSeek isn't just trying to undercut the competition for a quick spike in revenue. No. By making those continuous background tasks practically free, they are running a classic platform lock-in strategy. They want to be the foundational digital infrastructure for every developer in the country.
Wow.
Because once a developer builds a complex agent-driven application deeply integrated with DeepSeek's memory architecture, the switching costs become impossibly high.
Give them the razor for pennies, and they have to buy your blades forever.
Exactly.
But sustaining a 75% discount and slashing your core computing costs by 90%, I mean, that burns through capital at a terrifying rate.
Oh, it's a massive cash burn.
And DeepSeek built its reputation as a scrappy, highly efficient startup doing more with less. But you cannot fund a global infrastructure price war against state-backed rivals on a shoestring budget.
No, you can't. And that reality is driving the current valuation metrics we're seeing. The era of cheap, rebellious open-source AI is over.
So what era are we in now?
We are officially in a capital-intensive infrastructure war. DeepSeek is currently owned by a quantitative hedge fund named Highflyer Capital. But looking at April 2026 reports, they are now in deep funding negotiations with absolute corporate titans.
Like who?
Specifically Tencent and Alibaba. And the rumored valuation is exceeding $20 billion.
A $20 billion valuation for this supposedly cheap alternative. That's wild.
It just proves that efficiency algorithms are no longer enough to win the market. To power the agentic AI future on alternative hardware, you need infinitely deep pockets.
Makes sense.
If Alibaba and Tencent are stepping in to underwrite this price war, it signals that the broader Chinese tech ecosystem is fully committing to this parallel infrastructure.
So synthesizing all of this data for the investor managing your portfolio today, what is the core takeaway?
Good question.
Because we've looked at the 6,000 drug pipeline in biotech, fueled by centralized trials, and the Huawei-backed AI infrastructure, executing an aggressive market lock-in. The through line seems remarkably consistent across both biology and silicon.
It is. The through line is the permanent transition from a dependent manufacturer to an indispensable, self-sustaining hub of innovation.
The co-director has officially arrived.
Exactly. For investors, this means the broad brush approach is dead. You cannot just hold a global tech or healthcare ETF and assume it captures the best growth.
Right.
You have to actively seek out the specific assets drawing the heavy capital.
So in biotech, that means tracking companies licensing ADCs and bispecific antibodies with guaranteed upfront cash.
Right. And in the tech sector, it means looking beyond the AI models themselves and evaluating the foundational hardware and supernode infrastructure that makes this new ecosystem independent.
You have to follow the flow of the smart money, cutting past the flashy press releases and looking at the underlying infrastructure. Which leaves me with a final, somewhat provocative thought for everyone listening to ponder as we wrap up today.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
Well, we've established that the global superpowers are now operating these highly capable, deeply isolated dual hubs, right? We have one massive engine of innovation in the West and a completely parallel engine in the East.
Right.
But what happens if the geopolitical pressure cooker finally boils over and they stop sharing their early-stage breakthroughs entirely?
That's a scary thought.
Are we fundamentally charting a course toward two completely different futures for humanity? Will we eventually have to navigate an Eastern internet and a completely separate Western internet, an Eastern medicine cabinet filled with unique biologics, and a Western medicine cabinet with entirely different treatments?
It's a complex and honestly slightly daunting scenario. The technological and biological landscape is undeniably splitting, and the capital will ultimately reward those who understand how to value both sides of that divide.
Absolutely. Well, that is all the time we have for today's deep dive. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button.